Love, health and money are perhaps three of the most common topics for divination and magic, despite the fact that practising magic to find treasure or money was actually a crime under England's 1542 Witchcraft Act. So it's not surprising that money folklore would focus on how to use money for luck or to attract more of it. So let's find out how people did that and what they watched out for in this week's episode of Fabulous Folklore. Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Well, hello there and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host Icy Sedgwick. I hope that your February hasn't been too bad, and I have no idea how you're feeling about all the potential roadmap out of lockdown stuff that we've got going on in the UK right now, but who knows how all that's going to pan out. But we're not here to talk about what's going on in the world today, we are here to talk about folklore and money. And as Robert McDowell points out in his article called The Folklore and Finance, money is a bit of a weird magical thing because most money is created invisibly, which was memorably demonstrated by the recent GameStop thing, and we only actually see it tangibly in the form of banknotes and coins, but both of those actually represent a higher value than they're actually worth, which is all very, very strange. So what is that if not mystical? And money certainly does make its way into plenty of mythology and folklore. And I mean, obviously we did look at Charon the ferryman and obviously the coins that people used to pay him with to get across the Styx to the underworld. We've got the custom of the coin and the Christmas pudding. And whoever found this particular silver sixpence in their piece of pudding would basically enjoy luck and wealth in the coming year. And also, I should point out, when we go first footing for New Year, we always add a silver coin, which to be fair is usually 20p, to the tradition to help bring wealth into the home. So there's quite a lot of traditions that do involve money of some description, and it's either the money's there to attract more of it, to create luck for you, to bring protection of some description, and all that jazz. So in this episode, we are going to have a look at how money shows up in folklore and superstition, and we will also briefly take a detour into the phenomenon that is fairy gold. So let's get into the episode, shall we? So we are going to start off with wishing wells because I think that's probably quite a common place where people are used to the intersection of money and folklore or superstition and all that kind of thing. And Jacqueline Simpson and Steve Roud in their excellent Dictionary of English Folklore talk about the custom of throwing coins into water and then making a wish. Now, the first record in the Oxford Dictionary for the term wishing well actually comes from 1792, but they actually think that the practice relates to people centuries ago making offerings at holy or healing wells. There is actually a legend of Romans in Gloucestershire throwing silver coins into the water whenever they crossed it. And the Romans, to be fair, did make a lot of offerings to water deities, including 2 altars to Neptune and Oceanus that they actually left in the River Tyne. Now, it is possible that they obviously were essentially paying their way, and that was why they were leaving coins, because they were portable and they were quite easily accessible metal objects that they could then give to the water deities to kind of bring some kind of luck or protection to their journey. And it is certainly preferable to the folklore phenomenon of the coin tree, and in this tradition people push coins into the bark of trees or tree stumps. And it is generally done to make a wish, but there isn't really any explicit link between the coin and wealth unless that's what someone actually wishes for. And some believe that these coin trees offer healing powers, so shoving the coin into the wood will somehow transfer any illnesses that you're having to the tree. So they're a little bit like the rag trees or the clutie trees that were covered in the Hawthorn episode. Now the problem is the fact that the metal basically leaches into the tree bark and slowly poisons the tree. So please do avoid joining in the practice unless it's done to an already fallen tree, because I have seen somewhere it's been a tree that's obviously fallen over because of the wind or whatever, and then people have used that one. But I hate seeing it done to trees that are actually alive, because you think you are literally just killing it, which probably isn't really what you intended. But thankfully most coins in money folklore are lucky without you needing to go around killing any trees. And bent coins or coins with holes in them are most often associated with luck. And Simpson and Roud remind us of the crooked sixpence of the nursery rhyme, because in the medieval era, coins were actually bent to confirm a vow or a cure or to bring good luck. It is important, however, if you are going to bend a coin for any of these things, that you offer the coin to a saint while bending it. Elsewhere, silver coins become either lucky, protective or curative, and in Britain we have the old custom of giving a new baby a silver coin. I should point out that the reasons for this do differ slightly, because McDowell notes that it's actually to bring prosperity in the future for said baby, but I've also heard others do so since the coin is believed to keep the devil away. There's also a slightly expanded custom in Northumberland, which was noted in 1925, where when a baby first visited a house, the owner should give the child a silver coin, suet and an egg, and this apparently meant that the child would never want for food or money. It doesn't say what they were supposed to do with the suet or the egg, but there we go, that was what the superstition was that was recorded. Clearly, children and money does bring up concepts around the Tooth Fairy, who again we have had an episode on, and obviously she left silver coins for children in exchange for their baby teeth, which is a really, really odd practice. A bride, on the other hand, might actually put a silver coin in her shoe for luck, and an even stranger choice was the belief in rings made from silver coins. Now, these weren't just any silver coins, these were actually the ones that were left in the church collection, so they were referred to as sacrament money. And Simpson and Roud actually explain that a person who was suffering from fits would beg a penny from 12 unmarried people of the opposite sex, and then they would go to the church and then they would exchange that amount of money that they'd collected for one of these silver coins, and then they would turn that into a ring that would apparently cure fits. There's no sense of whether it actually worked or not, but obviously this is something that people believed it would. There is a possibility that silver is specified due to the metal's perceived properties, because let's be honest, whenever you think silver in folklore, you probably think about it being used to defeat werewolves. Some people think it also defeats witches as well, but to be fair, silver still isn't effective as iron for dispatching supernatural threats. So it's quite interesting that the one place where people do use silver instead of iron seems to be in the relation of money, probably because that's what it was actually made from. Now, for all its uses in financial transactions, money does also appear in folklore as a way to seal a bargain. And the first type of this is the so-called God's penny, which was actually one way to seal a bargain between traders. So think of it as being a bit like a binding deposit from the buyer. So they would essentially hand over this God's penny to the person they were buying something from to kind of hang on to it for them. And according to Simpson, and I quote, the name possibly derives from an earlier belief that this sum should be given to the church as a voluntary donation, end quote. There was also the concept of earnest money, and this was money that was given to new servants and farm workers when they were hired. So accepting the payment meant that they had to turn up on the agreed date for work. So the payment did become quite a handy way to make sure new hires did actually show up. Then, of course, we have the King's Shilling, which was money given to men to encourage them to enlist in the army. And I should point out that the acceptance of the King's Shilling wasn't always a conscious one, and according to forces.net, people would slip a shilling into a drinker's pint at the pub, and then after drinking the pint, the drinker would discover he'd accidentally accepted the summons to the army, and there wasn't actually any way of going, no, I'm alright, can I give you this back? It was like once you'd accepted it, and that was it. And this did apparently lead to the creation of glass-bottomed tankards so that drinkers could be sure no shillings lay at the bottom for them. I have heard that those kind of stories quite a lot on things like ghost walks and stuff, so I've never been 100% sure how realistic that is, but that is indeed how the lore and the legends about the King's Shilling go. And finally, we do have luck money, and this was money that was given to the buyer by the seller when a deal was completed successfully, and apparently this was then to bring them luck. And some people also believe that you needed to spit on the money to make it lucky, but unfortunately the folklore doesn't actually say who was doing the spitting. Was it the buyer or the seller? But either way, it's quite interesting that on one hand you've got the buyer giving the seller the God's penny to say, yes, I want to buy this thing, and then you've got luck money, which is the buyer then basically giving the seller a little bit of the money back to go, aye, grand, here's some luck for you. Now, we did already quite briefly touch on the Tooth Fairy and her rather bizarre money exchanges for baby teeth, but this clearly wasn't a reliable or indeed sustainable form of income. So it did become necessary to come up with ways to otherwise attract money or predict prosperity. And you've probably heard of the idea that an itchy right palm means that you'll receive money, and an itchy left palm means that you'll spend money. But how about this one? If ants build their nest beside your door, it means that your future is financially secure. But a bee landing on your hand means that money is on the way. And in the Bahamas, the black witch moth is locally known as the money moth or money bat. And according to one legend, you'll come into money if they land on you. And similarly in South Texas, if a black witch moth lands above your door and stays there for a while, you will supposedly win the lottery. Obviously, you may remember that kind of lore from the Moths episode if you were listening to that one. Incidentally, if you drop money on the floor at home, you should actually step on it and then say money on the floor, money at the door before you pick it up. And then that apparently means that more money will come your way. And incidentally, if you do see money in the street, there are competing strands about what you should do with it. So naturally, you've probably heard the rhyme, find a penny, pick it up, all day long you'll have good luck. So with this in mind, you would probably pick up the penny for luck, wouldn't you? I mean, most people would. But as Emily Denuzzo explains, some people think that you should only pick up the coin if it lies heads up. If it's tails up, you should actually flip it over so it's then heads up and leave it so that the next finder can have the luck instead. I did also come across one superstition that said that if you do find money in the street, you should actually spend it as soon as possible because it'll actually bring bad luck if you hang on to it. This could, of course, have been put around at a time when it was important to keep the money circulation flowing, and it obviously didn't exactly predict the rise of the billionaire. But there we go. I'm not going to start on that particular rant. But we are almost at the end of the episode because, to be fair, there wasn't actually as much money folklore as I was expecting to find. A lot of it is either people casting spells to bring more money into their life, and that usually involves all kind of things like drawing the symbol for money, whether that's like the symbol for your currency on a mirror and things like that, which we cover in the mirrors episode. It's all that kind of thing, so it was actually quite difficult to find a lot of stuff that was really specifically related to money and wealth and so on, other than people using animals to predict how they were going to get wealth, or sort of superstitions about what to do if you found money in the street. But there obviously is one final thing that we do need to cover, and I absolutely love this one because it's the idea of fairy gold. Now, there are two definitions of fairy gold, and on one hand it refers to money that's given by the fairies which is then discovered at a later date to be unusable, and in these legends it does sometimes turn into leaves. And on the other hand, it refers to money that is spent as soon as it's acquired. So that's that kind of easy come, easy go money that I'm sure we've all encountered at some point. But as W.H.D. Rouse points out, this folkloric belief actually existed in ancient Greece because a Greek proverb says, "Our treasure turned out to be charcoal." Now, there is no way to know if this simply illustrates the concept or it's actually about a belief in supernatural wealth, but he did actually write this into folklore as part of something called fairy gold. So it does make you think, oh, how old is this particular belief? And in a letter to a different issue of folklore, John Brunner offers an explanation for these legends, and it is actually quite plausible. But apparently a friend of his, who was an amateur paleontologist, had discovered an ancient ammonite fossil that had a golden sheen, and it was basically all down to the way that it essentially fell into its stratum and set. And it set in such a way that it retained this golden sheen. But by comparison, he did discuss the fact that other fossils can look like that when they're first discovered, but then because they haven't been set in the stratum in the same way, they later disintegrate and essentially leave somebody with what they thought was buried treasure, and then is actually essentially a handful of mud. So it does make you wonder if that's actually a plausible explanation. So it's become known as fairy gold because it's literally treasure one minute and then useless the next. And it does fit in with this idea of somebody being paid in fairy gold and then going to spend it and finding that it's not actually there. So I did quite like that particular explanation. But at the same time, there are actually some stories of fairy gold that I've come across where a fairy is actually paid in gold and it is actually a proper payment. And it does make you wonder if it depends on what the fairy is paying you for as to whether it's genuine money or whether it's this kind of fake gold that you sort of have one minute and not the next. But hopefully, based on all of this, you will see the direction that most money folklore runs in. And people have basically used coins because I guess they're prevalent and they're portable and they're easily passed between people. And they've used them to bring good luck, bind deals, and to offer protection of some description. And I suppose as well, if you wanted to use anything as a good luck charm, and obviously we did cover these in the amulets episode last week, a coin makes a lot of sense because it's the kind of thing that you could carry about you and nobody would be suspicious of, because of course you would have money on you, because most people would. I mean, what they do in a cashless society, I have no idea, but There we go. And I do find it's quite interesting that it's insects that become associated with the approach of money, because it's bees, moths and ants in this post that I certainly found that were all central to this idea of, oh, you will receive money if they land on you or live outside your house. So I was wondering, is it their flighty nature and this come and go as they please sort of approach that actually reflects many people's experience of money? Who knows? But it is the fairy gold itself that actually fascinates me. And I think it's quite funny that this idea that all that glitters is not gold might actually come from ancient fossils, which does make it both a bit more prosaic and also so much cooler in equal measure. Now, as I say, that is the end of the episode, because there was actually a lot less to find for this one than I've had with previous things that we've covered before. Now, obviously, as I always ask at the end of these episodes, I would love to know if you have any money folklore in your family, if you've got any superstitions or anything that you follow. You can always, if you want to leave it in writing, visit the blog post for this episode, and that obviously is in the show notes below, or you can just tweet me or message me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, whichever one's easier for you really. But it is quite cool to collect actual beliefs that people hold as well, just to see how far and wide these kind of folkloric things do spread. Now, this is the last episode for February. If you are a Patreon supporter at the $3.50 a month tier, or whatever it's called, you will be getting the Kaliak episode at some point in the next few days, but I do need to finish off editing that and what have you, but it is on the way. And next month for March, we are going to move into the folklore of water, so like legends and whatnot associated with water. So we are going to start off with Kelpies, but we will be looking at tales associated with lakes, rivers and waterfalls, so hopefully you'll find that interesting as well. But without any further ado, basically, that is the end of the episode. I hope that you have a marvellous week ahead, and I will see you back here in March for our next theme in Fabulous Folklore, and I hope you enjoy it. Cheerio! Well, thank you for listening, and thanks for visiting Fabulous Folklore. I hope you enjoyed your stay. If you did, why not consider subscribing in your podcast app of choice? If you enjoy the show, why not leave me a review and help other listeners to find it as well? And if you'd like bonus exclusive episodes of the podcast, then why not support me on Patreon? It does help me to keep the show going, and it means that you get a little bit extra every month as well. And you can find all of the necessary links in the show notes below. So without any further ado, I will bid you adieu, and I hope that you have safe travels wherever you're going on to next.